Hey, how's it going, guys? This is your boy Hazzed, and today is 7.1.5, of course, and we're going to be talking about the elongated breath spec. Now, the reason we're talking about this spec, and of course, the day before we were doing the max breath spec, this one is actually going to be maximizing the length of time you're going to be pushing out your breath. Now, doing so gives you extra runic power gain that you wouldn't have with the other spec, allowing you to do a couple little nice mechanical tricks going on with this spec. So I'll go ahead and explain those to you in this video. Go ahead and let you know kind of stuff you can do to survive longer with this spec, and of course not get countered while bursting. But anyways, guys, let's jump into this.
It's who we are, it's what we do, we've come so far, and now we pay the price, so don't even cry. The world is breaking down, and I cannot leave the ground.
Now, the difference between the last spec we were playing and this spec is going to be Horn of Winter and Hungering Rune Weapon. Now, with the original elongated spec, you'd be running Runic Attune, but since they buffed up some of the runic power gain, you can actually drop that off and still get a 50-second plus breath using these current, of course, abilities. Now, with Gathering Storms, the reason we're using that, of course, they got buffed by quite a lot of damage, and of course, when you're using Breath spec, all you do is pump out runes to generate more runic power, and of course, when you're spending runes, it elongates. Gathering Storm makes it stronger, and it's really a strong combo when it comes to, of course, using the Breath spec. So you really you gotta go with Gathering Storms unless you're doing those mythic pluses, which that other spec just blew my mind away. So anyways, guys, talking about this spec, I stated that there was a bit of survivability, a bit extra that you could do with this spec over the last one. Now, with this spec, since we are using Hungering Rune Weapon and Horn of Winter, we will actually have a time where we're able to Death Strike within the middle of course, our breath, which is one of the reasons this is actually one of the best dueling specs when it comes to laying out an elongated burst. Now, when does that happen is usually about when, I gotta get some runic power here, is when you're gonna go ahead and go up in breath on something, and I'd say when you're dropping runic power, you're about to hit, I'd say 30 or 40, when you proc Hungering Rune Weapon, and you're gonna hit up, I'd say 2 or 3 obliterates, and that'll actually get you pretty close to capped runic power at that time, and that's when it's gonna give you a slight second to actually get a Death Strike off. And of course, the Frost DK, if you pop Icebound Fortitude and hit a Death Strike, you're basically gonna get a full heal. And as the macro, of course, that we made for that instant healing macro, so you only have to hit one button, and it's gonna be faster than, of course, if you hit 2 different buttons. It's kind of ridiculous. But slash cast Icebound Fortitude, and of course slash cast Death Strike, it's going to give you that instant cast. So let's say I'm popping breath here, we got our breath going off, it's doing some massive damage, and we're starting to take damage. We can decide if we want to AMS in that, we can decide if we want to do whatever. Now we're going to pop Hungering Rune Weapon right now. We're going to try and cap off our, of course, runic power. Right here we can Death Strike, get a nice heal off, and then go back into our rotation. We can actually get another one off in there if we wanted to, and go ahead and actually hit Horn of Winter to gather a little bit more runic power, and push our, of course, our damage back up. Popping Fallen Remorseless Winter, that was actually a lot easier than it used to be, believe it or not. When you used to do that during that breath burst, it was actually extremely difficult to do it in PvP for a lot of people because you had to time it correctly. It looks like there's actually a lot more capped leeway with Hungering Rune Weapon than there was in the past. You might even be able to get off 2 Death Strikes in a lot of PvP, kind of like I just did during that breath, because believe it or not, during, of course, Hungering Rune Weapon, as you're spending those runes, there's going to be a lot of excessive runic power that's not going to be used during that time. Heck, you might actually be able to get off a couple Frost Strikes if you were really daring, but I don't suggest doing that. But that's crazy, yeah. So going on with that little heal there, it's definitely something you can do using, of course, the breath macro. Makes it a lot easier, because if you're using the breath macro, of course, and you're spamming your obliterates, you can go ahead and hit Icebound Fortitude without, stopping your rotation or switching back and forth, maximizing the time between the two, and really just giving you a lot better survivability than, of course, the max burst spec was. Now, that was one of the things a lot of people were complaining about, because the consistency spec, you could basically use it whenever you wanted to. You had so many different ways to generate that runic power that it didn't matter the consistency spec, and it didn't really hurt the chain. With breath, a lot of people felt like it hurt their damage in the long run, because obviously it does if it causes your breath to fall off. You know you messed up when your breath falls off at any point playing healing breath spec, the elongated breath spec, definitely. But that's going to be definitely the healing part. Now, why is this the better dueling spec? When it comes to breath, of course, when your breath comes out, besides that part I just showed you, you're going to deal a lot of damage. Now, it's not going to be damage that's dodgeable. Of course, they could cloak it, kind of like a rogue duel. Using this spec compared to the consistency spec, this spec is actually going to be a lot more effective for fighting rogues than it would for the consistency spec to fight rogues. And one of the things you could actually do on rogues is, as they open on you or pre-open on you, one of the things you could do to generate runic power, even though you may not connect some of your obliterates, is actually pre-use hungering rune weapons, so you can pre-proc breath and actually get sure damage. Even if they're popping evasion, that's going to force them to play defensive. It's a really nice switch of things, especially from that, because the consistency spec, you're laying out obliterates, you're laying out frost strikes, and they're just dodging them for 10 minutes, and of course you don't get your healing off, and it's absolutely terrible. Of course, what I just showed you, you can actually get your healing off during breath, and it becomes a bit better when it comes to duels, I'd say. Now, the elongated spec, not only is it going to be better for dueling rogues, it's going to be better for dueling monks too, and I'd also have to say ret paladins, because one of the ways I've actually found out how to beat ret paladins is using the elongated spec. Now, as we saw, there's a buff to hungry rune weapon that actually makes it last longer, so that's actually going to take us all the way through a ret paladin's bubble. And then, of course, we can proc Horn of Winter at the end to push through the end of it a little more. And we can actually hold breath all the way through it, force bubble, hold it through the bubble, and then finish the duel afterwards. That was something I was doing in the beginning of the expansion for duels. And then, of course, I couldn't do it anymore. They nerfed into the ground. It wasn't that great anymore, and I had to switch to consistency for raiding and stuff. Yeah, I just almost dropped stuff on the ground. We got to stop that. But that's definitely going to help our dueling situation by quite a bit, playing this spec once you guys get it down. Now, the hard thing, of course, is generating runic power to go about it. Now, if you're in dueling situations with this spec, of course, you could pre-pop up some abilities to generate a little extra runic power early on, and then, of course, get your burst off a lot faster. Because a lot of classes, it's going to be whether or not you get your breath off or whether they get their burst off versus what you're going to lose during the breath spec. So sometimes you kind of need to pre-pop a few things to generate a little extra runic power, kind of like I said, for either healing and, of course, breath. And this kind of gives you the option to, since you do have, of course, a lot more runic generation with this spec than you do the other spec. Makes it a bit more versatile. Now, why is this spec, I kind of was talking about it in the last video. Now, why is this spec better for spread out targets compared to the last spec we were playing? Because the last spec, as you saw when we were really in close to things, I could get like 2 to 3 second kills on people. They would just absolutely explode. Now, when I'm running the elongated spec, kind of like I am right now, one of the nice things about this spec is, since we do have all this enhanced runic generation, you can breath a target. Now, let's say I'm just going to keep up some breath on this target. I'm doing quite a bit. First thing you want to use is a Horn of Winter, of course, since you do want that to roll around to the point that it comes back up after you're empowered. Now, let's say this guy's dead. This guy's over dead. If he didn't have a healer, he's way dead. What I could do here now is jump to the next target with my breath. Just breath the living crud out of this target. Maybe if I want to get sassy, smack my dragon out there. Go ahead and hit Remorseless Winter. Continue that AoE. This guy's dead. He got smashed. We're going to breath this guy over here now. He's getting absolutely decimated by the breath. And what are we going to do? Guess what? We're going to move to the next guy. Why? Because we're breathing the whole battleground. Everyone gets a taste of my bad breath. Everyone gets to understand what is rotted with the Death Knight's mouth. Like, you think Unholy's bad? You should smell the Frost Death Knight's breath. Now, as you can see there, we dealt insane damage to multiple targets. Now, in PvP, they'd be dying pretty fast to that. You die really fast to that. Like, that was enough damage coming out to literally kill 4 different targets with no problem. And that's one of the things that I take advantage of PvP a lot, is you'll see me kind of with this spec, is I'll sit back until I get runic power a little bit, and then I'll just straight start blindsiding people with this breath spec, just cutting them down. And before anyone knows what's going on, 3 of their teammates are dead. And it's absolutely ridiculous. Now, one of the things people talk about is the CC when it comes to, or not CC, it's hold on, it's coming to me, yes, being CC'd during the breath spec. It's, well, how do I counter that? Everyone CCs me and destroys me. Now, one of the things you got to remember during breath spec, you kind of have to think about your trinkets. You have to think about, of course, your AMS, because you AMS, you can't be affected by spells. You also have to decide what you're fighting. If you're fighting rogue, chances are you're going to be stunned. You're going to save your IBF for that. If you're going to be blinded, chances are you're going to save your trinket for that. You just have to be very conscious about what you're fighting and what CCs you're probably going to be hit with. Now, you can use Wraith Walk during breath, so that is pretty handy for a nice little dispel there. And one of the nice things about the elongated spec is it does counter being CC'd a lot better than the other spec. Well, the other spec bursts out really fast, so it makes it harder to catch the burst coming on you and CC it. But with the elongated spec, of course, I said if you keep the breath for 40 seconds, you've outlasted the other team's cooldowns. You've outlasted the other healer's cooldowns, and it's lasted quite a while. Like, you're making them fret so bad at this point. It's ridiculous if you can keep it for that long. But as for CC, of course, let's say you're DPSing on a target, you got breath up, you get hit in a stun. You don't got enough time for IBF. Oh crap, you're going to use whatever you're going to use to get out of it. Now, one of the nice things is, since the, of course, Hungering Rune weapon has been elongated, I can't actually use it right now since it's on cooldown. Let's say you're about to take a CC right now. If you proc Hungering Rune weapon before you know you're going to be CC'd, because let's say they've done it to you twice in this match and you're at 30% dampening because everybody hates twos right now with healers. I don't actually know about twos right now. What do you guys think? Let me know down in the comments below if healer DPS has been better or worse than 7.1.5. Have you felt like double DPSs went up or down? I'm kind of curious about that. But as we were talking about, you can actually pre-pop, of course, Hungering Rune weapon to actually last through CC with breath to get, of course, a major breath through CC. It's kind of like the whole paladin bubble thing. You just kind of have to see it coming. If you're going up against like a mage and a rogue, chances are you're going to get CC'd during it. So you're either going to use your AMS correctly, or of course you're going to come out and pre-pop and power after AMS to avoid the CC. Things like that. You just have to be kind of conscious of playing the spec. And the spec can actually be pretty versatile. The more you think about it and the more ways you can use this, kind of like a shaman's totem, you know, when he's spirit linking. You imagine a breath, totem, spirit link, remorseless winter, more damage. It's ridiculous. But anyways, guys, I hope you enjoyed this little informational video and these tricks that you can do on this class. Of course, if you want the breath macro to be down in the comments, I'll also put the healing macro down there in the comments. But of course, I'll be testing this spec out in BGs and showing you guys how to ramp it up. But I wanted to kind of do a kind of a tutorial for these nice little tricks, because it really sounds like a lot of you guys were having some major problems with it. So I just want to kind of take care of that. As for honor talents, I didn't really talk about honor talents in this at all yet. Hold on here. You know, I'm pretty much running the exact same as the other spec until the bottom one. Now, if I'm running the BG, I'm going to be running overpowered rune weapon for the reduction on 2-minute cooldowns, because I want the elongated breath every time I can get it up, every time possible, because I want that big breath. It's what you want. That's also going to give you the ability to heal more in battleground situations, because normally, of course, it's a 3-minute cooldown, and that breath is on a 2-minute cooldown. It comes up every 1 minute, so you'll always have it for breath, and you'll also have it for a smaller cooldown in between. So this spec also, of course, a little more consistency outside of the major burst spec for dealing a bit more damage. So I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and until next time, this was your boy Hazzed.
At the edge of the hellfire.